Just want to let you all know that if you're new to the podcast, please, if you like the podcast, please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening on. It really helps with getting more listeners and subscribers our way. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe.
I do want to mention, hey, Nicky and I did a little, we recorded a few years ago. We recorded a song a week.
For
live
a whole year,
for 52, a whole year, and some of those songs.
So we had 52 songs by the end of the year.
Some of them during the holidays we recorded some Christmas tunes, and we have those that is available as a Christmas holiday EP right now. You can listen to it on Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music, or you can download it for purchase on Bandcamp. That'd be maxandnicky.bandcamp.com.
What's
or you can
it called?
Listen on SoundCloud, or not? It's not SoundCloud. It's called Max and Nicky's Christmas album.
Lovely.
And you got White Christmas on there in the vein of the Drifters, so it's a doo-wop version. You got a song by our sister Laura Weinbach that we performed called "I'm Not Really in the Christmas Mood This Year." I'll be home for Christmas
and have yourself a merry little Christmas.
And we do it in that unique Max and Nicky way. So you'll be hearing some harmonies there.
Love it. Is there any whistling?
There is definitely some whistling on Have
Yourself a Merry Little Christmas,
I believe. Wait, is there?
I don't know.
It's worth listening to the whole album just for the whistles.
We do have also, as we said, we have Max and Nicky's Top 40, which was part of the 52 weeks of recording, and we have whistling on that if you want to check that out as well. So.
And one more thing to promote. Sorry, a lot of shameless self-promotion.
We're eating through the tape, guys.
But we are. Real quick, we also, if you're thinking about last minute Christmas presents, we have a Max and Nicky t-shirt for sale. You can go find that on maxandnicky.com, okay?
Is it holiday themed or no?
It's not. It's year round, so you can wear it year round.
You can wear it year round.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. Well, okay. So here, hey, how's it going? This is episode 2. The reset of Splitting Hairs. Or is that the intro? Or no?
Well, sure. We could do that, or we could just do the way we usually do it.
Hey, everybody, welcome back.
It helps with editing to say, welcome back to another edition of Splitting Hairs with Max, Nicky, and Nickon.
This is all going in the episode.
I think it should. This is good stuff.
Well, we're learning how to introduce this podcast.
The reset. Introduce the reset of the
podcast. So
exactly.
So
anyway,
welcome.
So that's it. That's how we're going to do it every week.
Yes,
everything we just said up until this point is how we'll introduce it,
and then it begins.
Yeah.
Cue the music.
Memorize those lines.
Yeah. Oh, well, now we have the caption, so we can study over the course of the week. It's great.
On today's episode, and this is a topic that Nickon had originally suggested, is the fallacy of the Beatles versus the Rolling Stones.
Wow, I'm looking at the closed captioning on this. It is pretty good, I gotta say. Well,
see, this is the distraction I was talking about.
But I'm just saying it's taking into account it'll process something and then it'll change it actually. Almost like it's like, oh wait, that's not what it said. That's not what he said. It's actually this, and it changes it. That's
that has nothing to do with the Beatles nor the Rolling Stones.
Well, it was, yeah. So okay, so let me.
Or the fallacy.
No, it said Beatles. Beatles, not Beatles.
Anyway,
sorry.
But before we get into
context, so give us some context. I don't know if you guys have seen the Disney documentary series on the Beatles, Get Back.
Definitely have.
Most certainly have.
Hey, we watched it
amazing.
Last Thanksgiving time this year.
Yeah, I think
last year.
I think it's pretty cool.
I mean, personally, I loved it.
No, I know a lot of people think it's amazing.
Hold on.
I just
Max speaks for himself because I loved it too.
Well, look, check it out.
And I there is no shortage. Wait, how do I say this? I could keep watching Beatles footage nonstop.
Don't get me
forever.
wrong.
You know,
I love
I will always be interested.
And just watching them struggle through it and discover these songs that become just like some of the great songs of music history.
There's so much about the documentary that is love. I love just how you do see how Paul is struggling to keep this band together, really.
Keep the band together.
And you see him him and Ringo tear up at certain points when I can't remember which one of them says when George and John are both not there, and he's like, and then there were two.
Yeah,
and he's like, they're tearing up, and Paul, and they're all really young still. They're all in their 20s still. And,
yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about.
George is only like 25 or 26.
It's very young.
And Paul, while he's struggling to keep the band together, he also is not quite good at picking the right words to say to like George, to not upset him or to not come across as a little bit of a
some of those dynamics were so great.
No,
like
I think
when
that's
George
really
drops
interesting.
I Me Mine, and they're like, yeah, that'll end up on the album. And then it's like one of my favorite songs.
Well, it's funny. It is one of my favorite songs on the album too, but it just wasn't rehearsed at the time. I mean,
right? No, of course, but it's just like funny. They're just like shitting on George, like, yeah, whatever, George.
But there's what's also as cool is that one part where Paul's first playing Long and Winding Road, and everybody just is quiet and watching him play, and you're like, all of them are thinking at the time, wow, this is a beautiful song.
Well, I think my favorite moment of the entire thing, like, I don't remember, like one of the suits is just like chattering it up with Ringo, and Paul's just like, he's not even playing one of the songs. He's just like fiddling around on the piano, and Ringo's just not even paying attention to the suit. And he just like interrupts the guy, and he's like, I could just watch him do that all day. And it's like,
I could
just watch him do that all day.
Yeah. My favorite part is when, as Ringo he's waiting for everyone to show up, except Paul, I think, is already there. And he's waiting with two other guys that are sitting next to him, and they're sitting on the ground. And Ringo goes, I just farted.
No, I just wanted to let you all know that I farted.
No, he didn't. He goes, I just farted. I wasn't going to say anything, but I just figured I should let you know. It's like...
I know Max and I were cracking up at that part.
It's the funniest part of the whole
thing. I also loved seeing their personalities and like how funny like John is just he's so funny. He's like so like sassy and just like, but also silly.
I think to a detriment sometimes to accomplishing things.
Yeah, of course. It seems like Paul was kind of giving into that, and he had fun with that, but I think Paul really wanted to get down to brass tacks and wanted to work.
Sure.
Whereas but at the same time, I think part of it was also them waiting for Glyn Johns to set things up, actually, and the engineer.
Yeah, a lot of it was just them messing around, yeah.
Yeah, I think, here's the thing. The reason I think it's pretty cool is, look, I can watch Beatles stuff all day. I love watching it. I love, delving into the mythology of it all.
As if there's a trove of Beatles stuff. There isn't, other than the stuff that was produced for, public consumption. The cool thing about this is that you're seeing them in this format.
Okay, but no, what I'm saying is, as a documentary though, it's not like Peter Jackson, he didn't shoot this, No. It was shot beforehand.
Sure.
He had to trim it down to, there was hundreds of hours of footage. I would love to see all of that, actually, personally.
Sure, yeah, I would too.
The thing about it is,
it was more than that. He had to like use all this technology to colorize it.
And that's really cool. And it's great to see all this footage, but I keep thinking in my head, is he trimming it down into a narrative that suits what he wants, like his narrative, and also he has to get the okay of the living members and the estates of the members that aren't living anymore to make sure, okay, they're okay with this coming out, And so I feel like anyone's assumptions about, it was really like this because we just saw this in the documentary. I always feel like I'm always thinking, no, that's just the way Peter Jackson is portraying it in this documentary. And I think
he did a pretty serviceable job at representing the way it was, though.
And it's also
maybe we don't know.
You can be cynical
actually.
and poke holes in it, but it's like, listen. I mean, I think one thing that he did do was like, though the duration of those shots was, or like just the scenes in general, was long enough where you really felt that, maybe there were entire scenes where they were just yelling at each other.
Yeah,
and maybe he cut that out. I honestly, I don't really care because in my I didn't even see much of a narrative other than like. Wouldn't it be cool to be on the be a fly on the wall, watching these legends just exist? And
we're talking about Dana Carvey and David Spade at this point,
okay.
Right?
Here's an example of something that I know that I'm not sure that they shot it in the actual Let It Be documentary originally, but I know Canadian television had an interview during that time with John Lennon, and he was visibly not feeling that well. And this is a part of the reason why it seems like he's out of it sometimes when he's playing, or he's just not totally into wanting to record, is because he did heroin the night before. And like some people,
cameras on him.
Yeah, I know, but there were cameras on him during this Canadian interview that you can see on YouTube actually. And the story goes, this is also hearsay at this point afterwards, but during an interview, during their session, he said something to the effect of, boys, I took something last night I probably shouldn't have taken, or something like that.
Sure.
And so I feel like people thinking, oh, John Lennon just seems like he's on his way out of the band. Part of that feeling, though, is actually probably because he just did heroin the night beforehand, actually.
Sure.
And I mean, can we for sure validate that he did that the night before? I mean, I'm not sure. I think there are people that talk about that. Yeah, he probably.
Well,
did that
we also have to consider the fact that this is released on Disney Plus. But
regardless of that, it doesn't claim to be some kind of incisive piece of journalism where it's trying to get to the bottom.
I guess my problem is people's. Well, the thing is, my problem with it is people's interpretations after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it was just like, this is really rad to watch them.
Sure.
Again, especially to watch them struggle to find these songs that to us are very obvious. They're, the masterpieces or whatever, but they're obvious because we've heard them 1,000 times, and it's so obvious that this is how Let It Be goes. This is when he's like, obviously, and he's like trying to figure it out, and you're like, oh, he's so close, but it's so different.
I felt that way when George was trying to figure out something, and you're like, he's saying the wrong lyrics, and you're like, no, these are the lyrics. Say this. Right. And you're like, he's going to come up. That was so cool, actually. You're right. It was very rad.
No, look, don't get me wrong. It is rad to see footage of the Beatles doing that. I think that too. But what I mean is, like, I don't know.
Max is being overcritical, I think.
I think you're overthinking it.
It's not that. It's just
also. Here's the thing. Some of my favorite parts of it were just the rooftop concert. And even though we watched them perform the same songs a few times each, I was like totally down to watch them perform a few times each, Of
course. Yeah.
It was just that fascinating, I will say I did draw some interpretations as far as how to perceive Yoko Ono in that situation goes.
That was the one thing I wanted.
This is what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Nicky. Go ahead.
And for me, it just made her look worse, actually. I know.
Keep going. I'm curious.
A lot of people thought it kind of redeemed her sort of being there, but for me, it made her look more annoying. And
here's my interpretation of what you're saying.
More of a distraction.
Here's my interpretation of what you're saying. To me, her presence was very grating and obnoxious. And she's like, I have an idea. And we're like, who the fuck cares about your idea? And like, she would say it. And with the part that I think was redeeming was that nobody else in the band, or nobody in the band, was as resentful as I in the audience was. They were like, Yoko talk, that's John's girl, whatever, she's cool. Like, nobody was bothered by her in the band.
I don't know. I think maybe because there were cameras on them, they didn't express.
Maybe.
Here's actually
maybe
there wasn't
right.
an eye roll. There wasn't an eye, like, you roll your eye at least. Like if somebody says something stupid,
but like there was like a close up before
humor.
of
The Office.
there was a close up of Yoko trying to give John a piece of gum, and he's talking to somebody else, and she keeps trying to put it in his hand. I'm like,
right,
quit it. He doesn't need this right now. Stop trying to bother him. He's talking to somebody else.
Exactly. But here's the thing: you're annoyed, but John isn't annoyed. Right?
Maybe you're right.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, man, it's totally okay.
I think some of them were kind of annoyed that they didn't express it in the video. Reason being is I have listened to I haven't just watched video footage that exists, but I've listened to audio that exists of those recordings and the time spent in that studio. And there was a meeting that they had at one point where Paul and Linda's happens to be there, and George is there, and a few others. And I think George is expressing some dissatisfaction that Yoko's there, and actually Linda is expressing dissatisfaction. She's like, she keeps inserting her opinions in it. And Paul, though, is the one that is kind of the voice of reason. He's like, yeah, but he's just in love, he's just in love.
Yeah.
Who are we to see? He's like, yeah, maybe she's kind of inserting stuff, but it's okay. I don't mind, And I'm like, and that goes against, I already knew that already went against people's perception of Paul being the tyrannical, person in this thing. Because it sounded like, oh, what a good guy. He's actually, he recognizes like, oh, he's just, this is like the first year that he knows Yoko. I mean, he's just totally in love right now, or he's just smitten. And he's like, that is understandable. I understand that. So it didn't really change my perception of Yoko. It already just kind of, I already kind of understood that to be the thing already at that point.
Well, anyway, regardless, because we should actually move on to the topic at hand.
Yeah, the purpose of this is not to talk about the Beatles.
We can all agree that we enjoyed the documentary, and it's just
we can
really
all agree
fun.
that it was rad.
Sure. Yes.
I also want to say, if anybody's viewing this, the video footage of this, forgive my choppiness on my end. For something.
Yeah, you're still a little choppy, but it's not terrible.
Yeah, no, exactly. Forgive my choppiness.
Sorry, just one last note on Yoko.
Max.
Just to disagree with you guys on it.
It's just called splitting hairs.
I personally don't necessarily think that Yoko was interrupting anything in the recording process, though. Actually, it seemed like
she didn't whenever stop a take or anything.
Well, no, but also it didn't seem like she was giving. She just kind of did stuff when they had downtime, actually, because it seemed like a lot of times they were waiting for. Again, they were waiting for Glyn Johns to get things set up.
Yeah, but she did seem grating, though, did she not?
And maybe in the context of a documentary where you just like want to watch these legends do their legendary stuff.
Sure.
In that context, it's grating. But if they're spending 7 hours together straight, just like sitting around on those chairs waiting for the recordist to like be ready, I
hate these people that think like, oh, what Yoko was doing was genius. I'm like,
no.
Stop trying to be different.
No, I think actually, and what I did like about the documentary is they kind of highlighted the fact that it wasn't genius by Linda's daughter doing the same thing. Heather. She kind of goes, and John's
like,
mic, and John's like, Yoko, look. And it's like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's cooler that Heather's doing it because it comes from a more genuine place, of course.
Right, yeah, sure.
Anyway.
Well, so I was saying, I'm trying to recommend this movie to my buddy a couple weeks ago. And he's like, oh, I don't like the Beatles. And I'm like, what? Like that alone, I was like, that doesn't make I don't know. Like I get like they're not your favorite band or whatever, but like how do you not like the Beatles?
I mean,
it's like saying you don't like rock music.
Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Get the hook. Get the hook.
And then he says, yeah, growing up, my dad was a Stones guy, and so and I was like, no, like what's the rest? What's the rest of that thought? And like I knew what he meant because at some point. Like during as these two bands were becoming very, very famous, apparently you were either a Stones guy or a Beatles guy.
I don't think that was a thing necessarily in the 60s, though. I feel like maybe that was...
Well, maybe...
Was that a thing? I feel like it's not like a... It's not like a Smiths and Cure
that
kind
most
of thing.
people recognize, though.
I feel like that came later on. People decided
especially
to
at the
that.
time.
Like how much
most
later on,
people
do you
have
I
to
don't
recognize.
know. Maybe I'm incorrect.
Most people have to recognize how much more diverse the Beatles catalog is than Rolling Stones catalog. But before we get really into it, I did just want to touch up on just how was your Thanksgiving?
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
Let's not talk too much about it, but just you're in California right now, right, Nickon?
Yeah, I'm in California at my parents' place. They say hello to both of you.
Oh, okay. We say hello back.
Yes.
Along with Katayuna as well.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not here, but I'm sure she would say hello if
did she celebrate with you?
She did. Okay.
We
went to our aunt's place in Napa, which was very nice.
Ooh,
and
fun.
it was nice. It was good. It was a good Thanksgiving.
Oh, awesome.
What about you guys? What'd you guys do?
It was just the two of us.
Just the two of us. I mean, we got on Zoom with the family, but
That's nice.
they're actually celebrating tomorrow. So my sister...
Not worth explaining.
Not worth totally explaining, but they're going to celebrate their Thanksgiving tomorrow, actually.
Okay.
But we did get on Zoom with them, nevertheless.
Thanksgiving Day with her husband's family. Anyway,
Gotcha.
Max and we cooked a bunch of stuff, just the two of us. And it's pretty neat. Max cooked his famous raspberry tart.
Well, I didn't cook it. I baked it.
He baked it, rather. I made some, we made some stuffing, we got some macaroni and cheese there, some rotisserie chicken. We didn't get a whole turkey.
We didn't make the rotisserie. We just got it from Whole Foods, but it's already made. It's good.
Got some pumpkin pie and,
we got some pumpkin pie. Oh man, Whole Foods pumpkin pie.
It's the best.
It's the best.
Whole Foods, if you feel like you want to sponsor us at one point.
Wait, do you not like pumpkin pie?
I don't like pie I mean, I don't dislike it. It's just.
Do you like cake?
Sometimes.
Do you like
sweets? I have to be in the mood.
Do you like sweets?
I'm not a huge sweets person.
Wait, did we talk about this before? I think you said this before to us, but
I might have. It's one of my stranger qualities.
There's a cake at Kat's wedding.
I did eat some of that. If I've been drinking,
and I kept telling people, I know you must be full.
If you've been drinking, it changes whether or not you like cake.
I remember thinking, this is really good, especially for a wedding cake. You guys all have to eat this because
it was very good, and it was gluten-free.
Wedding cakes are often not good.
That's
that
true.
One was good.
Yeah, it's all about how they look and not really
because
about anything else.
I think probably part of it is because when things get bigger in size, it's harder to make them
maintain quality.
Actually,
yeah.
Anyway, we all had some good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, raspberry tart I made is good.
On with the topic at hand.
Oh, no, and I made some whipped cream too. I mean, it's not hard to do that, but
no, you made it from scratch, so that's nice.
You just get heavy whip. You just get heavy cream, and then you put it in a food processor. Right. Well, I didn't add sugar because
you didn't add sugar
because we used it with the tart, and the tart was already sweet enough. So you pair it together, and
you don't need it.
Molto bene.
That's good. That was perfect. Hey,
so now the topic at hand: the fallacy of Beatles versus Rolling Stones.
Who wants to take what position?
Okay, let's just start off by saying I think all three of us can agree that we don't think there's even a contest. We all prefer the Beatles, right?
Here's what bugs me about it. I take offense to even having to choose. Like, I don't like. I guess I technically like more Beatles songs than Rolling Stone songs, but like, it's an annoying position to be put in. To have to say that I like this art more than this other art.
Okay.
Like, why are we rating stuff like that?
Okay, I agree with you in the sense that I think award shows are kind of BS. Why are we pitting art against each other? But I'll quote Paul McCartney, and Max, if you'll join me on this. The Rolling Stones is sort of a blues cover band. He says that. He said that on Howard Stern, and
oh man,
he's totally right about it.
I think he's teasing.
But so is Led Zeppelin. I mean, yeah, he's teasing.
He's teasing them, and not all their songs. But I mean, Painted Black is
There's some great songs.
Okay, anyway,
Little Helper. There's like 1,000. Not 1,000, but okay. I mean,
so
we only have 4.5 minutes left on this.
In about a couple minutes after we've decided who's the judge,
Okay,
Hey,
sure.
look,
Yeah,
I'll play the judge.
Oh, you'll play the judge.
Or do you want to play the judge?
No, I think I'll play the judge.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll play the judge.
I like it.
I think I can be a little bit more amenable on this than Nicky on. I think Nicky's
well,
a
no,
little more
but-
stringent, I think.
Okay, so who's taking the side of the Rolling Stones then?
Oh.
It's interesting. I would like you to, just for the exercise of it. Just for the
Interesting.
This is why I think Max
Okay,
would
maybe
be
I
better
should
at
do
taking the side of the Rolling Stones than I would.
Well,
Okay. Why don't we do that?
Actually, here's the problem is I feel like maybe Nickon, you might be more familiar with their whole catalog than I am, maybe.
I mean,
but Max, you might be more fair.
but I'm not like especially
okay.
Because my main critique is that they keep making records, and they don't suck, but it's like, all right, like okay, here's another.
Okay, I'll be the Rolling
Stones.
I'll do the Rolling Stones. I'll be the Rolling Stones.
I'll be the judge, and Nickon is the part of the Beatles. Now, at any point, we can, vouch for the other side. Obviously,
Again,
the rules are loose.
Law. Yeah.
Well,
I don't have a gavel like you had, so I'm going to
I
use
left my
phone
gavel in New York. All right, perfect.
or something. Maybe I'll use my microphone. All right. So we've decided the judges, and we are back. Ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just tuning in, we are listening to Splitting Hairs with Max, Nicky, and Nickon.
That's me.
This is Weird and Wild Stuff. We're talking about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Weird and Wild Stuff.
It's Weird and Wild Stuff. I saw my good friend Ed Shaughnessy and Doc Severinsen walking down the sidewalk the other night, and Doc Severinsen was wearing this groovy new little number. It was this groovy new little coat he was wearing. It was this sequined outfit, and I have to say he looked quite cute in it. Let's just say the drink I was drinking last night wasn't the only thing that was stiff that night.
Anyway.
That's good stuff. So where were we? So who's what?
I am the judge.
Okay.
Nickon, you're playing the Beatles.
I'm the
Beatles.
I'm the Beatles.
And Max is the Rolling Stones.
And so so again, it's fluid. We're all gonna switch things here.
Definitely.
But yeah, I will say, as the Beatles guy,
go ahead. Just begin it. Start it off.
Very talented, did a great job at making that sound that they made, and they're amazing. But like, I don't know. I would just like to me, they seem like more of a corporation at this point.
They're a blues cover band.
But like all they're doing is just touring the world, making their hundreds of millions of dollars, just playing the same, I don't know, 50 songs, let's say. And again, like it should go without saying they're very talented, more talented than I'll ever be, whatever. But like,
don't sell yourself short. As the judge, I'm telling you, don't sell yourself short.
Hence the hesitation there. But I don't know. There's something about who they are today that kind of ruins their legacy for me.
Interesting.
Would you? As a judge, I would say. No. Would you not say that?
You can't. You're not the judge. I'm offering the counterpoint.
All right.
You could say the same thing.
You should say that about Paul McCartney then.
Well, I was going to say, can't you say that same thing about Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr? I mean, Paul is like, for instance, yes, they're playing these songs over again, but that's because that's what people want to hear when they're going to see the Rolling Stones, right?
Yeah.
Same with Paul McCartney, and he'll play some new stuff every now and then, but I think he recognizes, same with any act that's older. Billy Joel even recognizes that. We saw Billy Joel at AT&T Park a few years back in San Francisco, and he played, all the hits, and it was great. We wanted to see him play the hits.
I've seen Paul McCartney live twice, and two of the best concerts I've ever been to. But
I've seen him twice too.
I will say this, Max, he's playing a good amount of Beatles songs, but he's also playing a good amount of Paul McCartney Wings songs, or just Paul McCartney songs.
And I guess
true. I mean, he does have Wings. He has
Yeah, it's better to play the songs that people want to hear. Of course. I'm not saying don't do that. I guess part of what bugs me is that they keep, as I said, they keep putting out these albums, and they're not. I don't know. Do we need to hear these songs? Like,
again, Paul McCartney puts out new albums. Do you think that they are worthy of listening?
But we're talking about the Beatles. We're not talking about the individuals.
That's true.
Mick Jagger has
it's a little impossible because. So you're saying the Rolling Stones should just break up? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying it. There's something annoying about it. There's something there's something just so like obviously corporate and capitalist about the operation.
Look, well, you know about the whole backstory about.
I will go ahead.
The whole backstory about.
And I should say, I'm
them
not like
owning the rights to. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger owning the rights to Bittersweet Symphony for a long time, and basically the lead singer
by the Verve,
Bittersweet Symphony, who wrote the song, he did not receive a dime of royalties until very recently.
Really, and that song is everywhere.
And I know, and it's due to this whole thing that Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. It's just so lame of them that they were gathering royalties from this song that they really had very little to do with.
Well, essentially, what happened was the arrangement of the song. So, dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
dun, dun, dun,
that's
dun,
a sample,
or it might be the actual melody of the singing. I forgot which part is, but that is it's very similar to the arrangement of one of their songs.
Oh, so it's not even a sample or anything? Ugh.
It's not a sample. It's similar sounding to not the actual melody of their song, but the arrangement of one of their songs,
which they didn't write.
Which they didn't write, actually.
What?
Anyway. But also that song was something that they kind of ripped off from the Staple Sisters.
Okay, I agree in theory.
What song was it? What Stone song?
I don't remember.
I want to say I can't remember. Night is in there's something
shitty song that nobody even likes, probably.
No, it's here's the thing. I listened to it.
That I probably don't like.
I listened to it back to back, and
I should also note I do love the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Like the stuff of theirs I love.
But there's a lot of stuff that is not.
80s I don't love.
Let me just say, I did listen to it, and there is some bit of a similarity that I can recognize.
In the arrangement.
No, I think I remember even the melody sounded. I could be wrong. I mean, maybe it is just the arrangement. I forget, but
can you copyright an arrangement?
Well, yes and no, actually, but. Let me just say, though, the song that, Nicky, you're saying that they ripped off from an older blues song, I listened to those back to back, and there's enough of a difference to me. It's more similar between the Bittersweet Symphony and their song than it is the blues song and their song.
Regardless, why should they be? They worked out a thing where the songwriter of Bittersweet Symphony got no royalties.
Yeah, it's kind of messed up, you know.
And Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were basically receiving, and the
Well,
estate of Alan Klein were receiving 100% of
He still gets performance royalties, though. You know, that's something that you can't take away from somebody. You know, you still get money for when it's played because you performed on the song, you know.
I don't know. I just think for them they have so many songs that they license probably that they're making money off of. Why just... This is that guy's only hit. That's the Verve's only hit.
Seriously. You know? Could you imagine being the guy from the Verve? His name is whatever.
Something Richard something.
Roland, I think. Or no, Rolling Stones. Anyway.
No, Roland, that's that Tears for Fears.
Rolling Stones are one of your probably one of his favorite bands growing up. I don't know, maybe.
Could be.
And then
I would say he's more of a Beatles guy though.
So now he is, yeah. Richard Ashcroft.
Right.
And then, so, they're your heroes or whatever, or to some degree. You look up to them in some way, at least for their success. Mm. And then you have this hit, and then they completely screw you over out of like your opportunity to have one hundredth of what they have. You know.
I know they already were so rich at that point.
I mean, it's just it makes you dislike the Rolling Stones more. I'm the judge, but I'm just trying to point out the facts.
Well, here's the thing, though. Listen to those songs back to back, though.
I'll listen to them after this. Yeah,
you might change your mind a little bit because I think
I'm not going to change my mind about
the right
fact
to not
that
have any right to his.
I probably not.
Created something,
right?
He's still regardless. He samples
wrote lyrics. The lyrics are different. You know,
rap artists or hip hop artists, they sample stuff all the time.
Yeah,
they're still getting some of the royalties from that.
Yeah, they don't give all of the royalties away. They just, it's a percentage. That's crazy.
I mean, there's some hip hop songs where you're like, this wouldn't even be a song without the thing they're sampling.
like half of P. Diddy's songs in the 90s.
Yeah, half of P. Diddy's songs are like Jay-Z's, he sampled the Forever Young by Alphaville.
And sure, yeah. It's like he's not even doing anything.
He's not doing anything with the song.
Yeah.
I'm like, the Alphaville portion of that song is the song.
Is the best part of that song.
It's the best part of the song.
Now,
and actually, it's funny you bring up Jay-Z. Well, because my intention was to okay, supposedly there's some kind of competition between the Beatles and the Stones. We would argue, most of us would argue, there's no competition. But I would argue there's no need to speak in terms of competition because they're just two bands that came up around the same time, started out with a similar style, and then diverged. And what I think is that, if you're a teenager in the late 60s, early 70s, you're bifurcated. It's like the same thing as like disco versus...
Say that word again.
I already used an SAT word. Bifurcated. Split, there's two groups, right? You're either really... You're like a cool guy who wears a leather jacket, and then you're a Stones person, or... you're a little more mainstream, a little more, whatever, accessible. I don't know, and therefore you'd be a Beatles person.
Now,
all these decades
they
later,
didn't just
we
do
see
that with
that
the
as
Beatles
silly.
and Rolling Stones. They did it with Led Zeppelin versus the Who, actually, as well. That was a thing too.
Oh, is that
was
so?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
That seems.
I thought it was more like punk versus disco, or like.
Well, that's. Those seem very
like
drastically different. I can understand people kind of.
Metal
but even then, why can't you like both?
And I do.
I like both too.
Actually, I think that's what a lot of post-punk bands were recognizing.
The judge rules that both are okay to like.
I think a lot of post-punk bands were realizing.
Like both Zeppelin and
we
ABBA.
actually like both things, and I think, like for instance, Blondie, they came out of that punk movement, but they were. I mean, Heart of Glass sounds like a disco song. I mean, that's a disco song. It is a disco song.
But that's the thing about Blondie.
They had that. They were part of that punk zeitgeist, though. At the same time, and the way they dressed also was not. It seemed punk too, like the way. The way.
Boy, was
Deborah
that Debbie Harry a beauty, huh?
Way Deborah Harry dressed.
I would say.
Her. If you look at her outfits, look at her jeans, for instance. They're tight. They're
hold on.
Tight jeans. They're not. There's no bell bottoms in that.
You don't need to yell.
Anyway,
let's see if we can bring bell bottoms up in every episode.
Well, it's not just the way Debbie Harry was dressing. The whole band had a mod look, actually, Max.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
But
we're splitting hairs.
Well, no, they played at CBGBs.
Yeah, their hairs
were
their hair. They had these mop tops actually, but kind of in the similar way that the Ramones sort of dressed actually. Speaking of punk,
well, they had long hair.
Anyway, we diverge. As the judge, I have to bring us back on course.
Bring us back.
Some of them did actually.
So, Nickon, you would say that there is no need for a contest. Why do you have to choose? But I will bring up the point as the judge.
I take offense to it. I take offense to having to choose.
Okay, but
it's not. Yeah.
What happened to being the Beatles side? Now you were just anyway.
As a Beatles lover, I can say safely that the Beatles are my favorite band of all time. Can you not say that? Even though I can say I enjoy some Rolling Stones, some Rolling Stones songs. But I can also say that Well, I guess the way to put it is maybe you shouldn't say objectively one band is better than the other, but rather I prefer this over this. Well, I don't know.
I just think it's a construct of like back when we had to be, and I would think that we should be continuing to strive to be less tribalistic.
Sure.
And that was just another way of like putting a label on yourself and being like, I'm a Stones guy or I'm a Beatles gal.
Right. Well, I think
in the same way that your friend had said.
Part of it is
and the craziest part of that is that a generation down, my friend he just doesn't like the Beatles.
He's continuing that tradition, that toxic tradition, rather.
The toxic tradition, yeah.
Well, I think part of it is, it is ridiculous. I mean, some people's arguments though are when they create this competition is, the Rolling Stones, they just got more of an edge to them. There's a rawer sound to them.
Yeah, it's all image.
Hold on, but I actually. Well, anyway, go ahead. Well, one can argue that maybe in their performance style,
it's like literal. It's literally as corporate as you can get. It's purely how they brand themselves. They're like,
exactly.
We're like, look at us. We're a bunch of.
You're right.
I must, as the judge, I gotta say, Nickon, you're supposed to be arguing for the Beatles here, and you're not doing a good job of that.
Well, because honestly, if I'm honest, it's because it's just the catalogs speak for themselves.
It's true.
There's no comparison. Like,
no, it is.
If we really want to get into it, there's no comparison.
The image actually same. Wait. You know what's interesting with regards to image?
Wait, no, hold on.
Even somebody like I just want to bring this to your point though is, even Bob Dylan, who's supposed to be, this folk guy, anti-establishment kind of salt of the earth. Joan Baez, I think, even once said he spent way more time in front of the mirror getting everything right than I did.
Right.
Isn't that funny? He was worried about his image, just like everybody else. It's all about how you're presenting, and I think that's okay. I personally think that's okay. He
wanted to be an enigma, and so maybe you do have to put some work into that. But now that he is an enigma, I think he truly lives that. Like, I don't think I've heard that he's just like he's just going to die on the road because he just doesn't he's not interested in doing anything else but just like touring.
Yeah, but you know what? He sold the rights to his songs recently. Speaking of corporate capitalistic stuff, he sold the rights to his songs for hundreds of millions of dollars.
The publishing,
and by the way, I have nothing
the publishing. No, I think it's all okay, and I think trying to create an image for the audience is okay. That's part of it.
Okay,
I think that's part of the theatricality of it all.
And again, all I'm saying is the reason we have to choose is because you have to I'm either the edgy guy or I'm
the poppier guy,
more amenable.
Well,
okay. I think Beatles do have some edge, a lot of edge too. By the way,
order in the court.
The thing about the Beatles is that they can do it all. They could have spent the last 5 decades, just doing the blues, right? Being a blues cover band. But they were like, okay, we're really good at that. But what if we were really good at trying some other crazy stuff out? And they were really good at that.
Nickon, I think that's the best point to make is that they could do what the Rolling Stones do, plus everything else. Like they delved into psychedelic music. They obviously had pop hits. They had old Englishy type of style songs. I mean, they had the genres they crossed in less than a 10-year span was like nothing that had ever been seen before or has ever been seen since in that short amount of time.
Absolutely. And to that end, actually, not only are the Rolling Stones not better or as good as the Beatles, they're not better or as good as Led Zeppelin, who arguably are classified as also being a blues cover band, right?
Who, the Rolling Stones?
No, Led Zeppelin.
Zeppelin.
No, Zeppelin. Rolling Stones are not. You're saying the Rolling Stones are not.
They're not as good as Zeppelin. Right. And again, as someone who hates to have to
well, I think that's, to be honest, I don't like to make that comparison. I guess the Rolling Stones continued on into the 70s, but I feel like Zeppelin is more part of that album-oriented rock that became big in the 70s. Much longer songs, that were more epic sounding, I guess,
Yeah.
Yes, they all came from the blues, you know, but one could make that. Where I think,
I'm just saying, if we're going to compare bands,
if you're going to compare bands, you can also
don't bring the Rolling Stones to a gunfight, you know.
Well, you can say that about, you know,
Max, you're supposed to argue on the part of Rolling Stones.
No, I know. I'm trying to argue. Let me explain. One might say Led Zeppelin wouldn't have existed without the Rolling Stones. You could argue that, you know, the kind of the performance style. If you ever watch any footage of Mick Jagger on stage, that just letting it all out, letting it be free, and having that kind of ruckus kind of voice, and just being able to, you know, be really just all out there on stage, you know, that was groundbreaking for a lot of people. Now, one could argue they were actually getting that from people like Little Richard, that you can say,
and James Brown.
And James Brown.
Well, here's the thing. Here's a point that you could bring up, Nickon. Paul McCartney and John Lennon actually wrote the Rolling Stones' first hit.
Is that right?
It's their first song that charted in the top 10 in the UK.
Well, is it top 10 or
something like
that?
It
just charted.
It was written by Lennon and McCartney. And so, because they were friends with them and they were like, they wanted to help them out, but they gave them a song that they didn't think was good enough to be a hit for the Beatles.
Right.
So that's really kind of maybe a really good point to make, is that, oh, this song is good enough for you guys, but not good enough for us. But also,
so yes, look, that is my point, by the way, for the record.
Well, hold on, but you know, the Rolling Stones did explore some other.
Look at their catalog. So I was listening to Mark Maron talk about
what's the song? Do you know, Nicky?
It's
I think it's
it might be Boys or something, or
no,
or something like. But I was listening to Mark Maron talk about Paul McCartney because he had just interviewed him on WTF.
Oh,
and he was talking about how he said, you know, I was always more of a Stones guy. He said that, and he's like, I don't even know why. He's like, there was just something more raw about them. And he's like, he said, but right now I can name way more Beatles songs off the top of my head than I can Rolling Stones songs.
And there are, for the record, way more Rolling Stones songs. They're just unremarkable.
They're forgettable. They're all forgettable.
By the way, the song is "I Want to Be Your Man."
I want to be your man. Bum, 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 bum.
I want to be your man. I want to be your man. I want to be your man.
It's a song that like would appear in the Beatles catalog.
Yeah.
Early both bands,
but
yes. I believe it's on. But Please Please Me.
But Ringo Starr sings the song, I think, right?
Oh,
it was one of those songs that they gave to Ringo to sing.
No.
I want to be your lover, baby. I want to be your man.
Right.
Right. That's right, Nicky. You're right.
I want to be your man. Ba, 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 ba. I want to be your man. Ba, ba, ba.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. That's on With the Beatles, actually. Sorry.
Uh-huh. But look, it's just.
By the way,
I hate when people say they don't like the Beatles, because to me, it makes me think, oh, you just haven't listened to the Beatles. Or you might have just listened to one or two songs by the Beatles.
I Want to Hold Your Hand or something. And
right. And I Want to Hold Your Hand, but I can understand why somebody wouldn't like that.
Yeah, I don't mind it, but it's like, okay, you've heard that 1,000 times. It's never going to be the first Beatles song I put on if I'm going to start listening to the Beatles.
Right. And so I remember this one girl I used to work with when I worked at Cobb's Comedy Club. She said,
name drop.
Oh, I don't like the Beatles. They all their songs sound the same. And I'm like, for one,
no, they don't.
Out of any band you could say that about, it would not be the Beatles you would say that about. All their songs sound different. They're one band that every song is a hit, basically, you know?
Yeah.
So
and maybe to that extent they sound the same, but they don't sound the same.
Like I told her, why don't you listen to I Want to Hold Your Hand and then listen to Let It Be? Like listen to something from the end of their career or the end of their run in the beginning. tell me that you think those sound the same. You know,
Nicky, I just for a judge, you're having a lot of opinion.
Well, no.
Well, we knew this was going to happen.
I wasn't.
That's
But
okay.
I'm just saying I
hold
didn't get
on,
to
hold
argue
on,
my
hold on.
points
No,
as a
hold
Rolling
on.
Stones guy very much.
Hold on,
here.
Max. Hold on a second.
Maybe I don't have a whole lot of points, I guess. But.
Right. Just now, I wasn't arguing against the Rolling Stones. I was arguing for the Beatles, for people saying they don't like the Beatles.
No, I know.
I was
just saying. Let me just say though, the Rolling Stones did explore other avenues. I mean, Painted Black is not a blues
It does
tune.
seem somewhat.
Painted Black's not a blues tune. That's a.
Of course not. It's a great song.
It's a great song.
It's an amazing song.
She's a Rainbow is a great song.
She's a Rainbow. That's also another great song.
There's so many great songs.
But
not as many.
I'm just saying. There you go.
Well,
you're not
did you say?
trying.
Can't you hear me knocking?
I mean, I
Max.
can't. I'm trying. This is the best I can do.
Did you say can't you hear me knocking?
Can you hear me knocking? That's a great song. I love "Can You Hear Me Knocking." When I'm playing "Sympathy for the Devil," "Can You Hear Me Knocking?" On Guitar Hero 2, that's one of my favorite things to play.
Sure. Or what's the song that goes?
I was gonna. And I miss you. And I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you. That's a good song.
Yeah.
Now,
it's many good songs.
That's kind of more of a disco-y sounding song too. It's not a blues song.
Well, they do have some disco songs.
Now, here's the thing.
That's
the very beginning part of "Under My Thumb." I really like that part of the song.
But the rest
with
of
those xylophones.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. It's the whole song. I love that song. It's a great song.
It's okay.
What happens? It just gets repetitive.
But you could argue.
Yeah, I just think there's this expectation when you first hear the intro of it. I'm like, this is more interesting, and then it goes into something more bluesy, and I'm like, okay.
Now I'm going to steer you guys in a little bit of a different direction. What about? You've talked about their catalogs, but what about the actual performance?
That's what I'm talking about.
Of each band.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Well,
no, here's my argument for the Rolling Stones. If you look at performances of the Beatles, and it was magnetic, do not get me wrong, but you could argue, John Lennon, he's got his legs are kind of spread apart a little bit, and he's kind of like this in this kind of awkward position.
They weren't rock stars, like the Stones are.
Mick Jagger has got these. He does the chicken move thing or whatever, and he's got all these moves.
Spectacle.
Now, to argue for the Beatles on this is they're all playing instruments, whereas Mick Jagger is just singing.
And their music speaks for itself. Whereas part of the enhancement of the Stones thing is the performance.
Well,
I'm not saying they're compensating for it, but it's like that is part of the allure.
Well, you could also say this.
That's part of it. The live.
I would say personally, and I, for a second here, I'm not going to be the judge. I think that Paul McCartney and John Lennon are way better singers than Mick Jagger. I mean, Paul McCartney especially has way more of a range actually than any of them. Now, I know some people prefer John Lennon as a singer, and I'm not saying I prefer Paul McCartney to John Lennon, but I'm saying from a technical standpoint, Paul could do any style of music and sing it really well, actually. And his vocal range was really wide, compared to any of the other Beatles and Mick Jagger.
Here's a question. Was there any but
that's part of what the appeal of Mick Jagger is like, hey, I'm not refined.
He's saying, he's raw. I'm doing something that anybody else could do. Wow, I can't believe we're already getting to that point. Okay.
Oh wow, really? Was there like tension? I mean, I know there was tension between the bands, but were they more friendly competitors? Or
no, they were. I think they were friendly. I don't even know if they even considered that competition very much when they were coming up.
Well, certainly the Beatles didn't.
I think they certainly. At the premiere of All You Need Is Love, which was the first. Look, here's how you can look, just to argue on behalf of Nickon, because I'm going to do that anyway. Look, there's a reason the Beatles were asked to have as the first universal
satellite broadcast
in the world.
around the world,
simultaneous broadcast. the band that they asked, the reason it was possible was because the Beatles agreed to make a song for it, actually. That was the reason they decided to go through with it, actually. Not just that they were asked to be a part of it.
But to take the Stones side, as a Stones fan, that's part of the appeal of the Stones. It's like, all right, the Beatles are a bunch of sellout, very accessible. Your mom can listen to them. But like, this is dangerous stuff that not a lot of people will find, I don't know, relaxing.
Okay. Well, to argue against that, though, the Beatles, in A Day in the Life, they were scrutinized constantly about their drug use, about some of their lyrics. Like,
they were scrutinized about it, but the Stones didn't have to be
scrutinized. On.
The Stones didn't have to be scrutinized because it was out there. They were like, this is who we are. You should be afraid of us. You should be worried that your kids are listening to us.
But I should also mention in that satellite broadcast, and the song they played on it was "All You Need Is Love." Mick Jagger is in the audience, singing along with them.
Yeah.
And
again, that goes back to the image.
And it's the first time they're premiering this song, and I'm sure everybody in the audience, Donovan is there too. They're all probably thinking, "Wow, this is one of the greatest songs I've ever heard." Probably,
There was some live show documentary thing produced by the Stones. I think it was like something circus. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
And I do remember the Beatles being on it, and I remember John being interviewed, and he was just like, and maybe I was too young to get the nuance of it, but he was like, it seemed like he was talking a bit of smack against Michael. He kept calling him Michael instead of Mick Jagger. He was like, which I was like, oh man, like, are they like, was there something weird going on there? But I'm sure, it was just like them being silly or him being silly.
Well, yeah, that was actually, I was listening to an interview with Tom Jones, and he was on the same bill as the Beatles, and he had never met the Beatles before, and he was rehearsing his song before the show that night, and he was getting like his tech down or whatever, and John Lennon's watching him in the seats, and he says something really cheeky to him, and Tom Jones was like really offended by it, and then one of the like assistants or whatever had to come up to him, and she's like, oh no, that means he likes you. He's just like being cheeky. He's just that's his humor, actually.
Right.
I mean, hey,
it's his British humor. It's like,
talk about a voice, Tom Jones.
Tom Jones is Welsh, actually.
Oh, he's Welsh. All right. Well, I was way off.
Well, he's British. He is British.
No,
sorry.
I know. Yeah.
But Liverpool, Liverpudlians, I guess, were known for being a little bit rough around the edges. Maybe
that's 2 episodes. Someone said. Probably Max has said Liverpudlians too. So let's try to keep that going too.
Or
John Lennon was one to say things impulsively and sometimes not even mean it. Like if you watch interviews of him on the Dick
I wasn't
Cavett show,
saying that the Beatles are better than Jesus Christ. I was only saying we were more popular.
Course,
But anyway. If you watch him in interviews on the Dick Cavett show in the early 70s, if you watch, he says stuff about Paul McCartney at the time, and then in the later 70s, he does interviews where he refutes those things he said in those early 70s interviews. And probably there was just more animosity toward Paul in the early 70s.
There was tension going on.
And there's more tension going on. And he, that the song How Do You Sleep, which is off the Imagine album, in the early 70s, he might have been directing that more toward Paul at the time. But in the later 70s, he's interviewed about it, and he's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I was talking about myself, how do I sleep at night?
Right. Well, this is actually, so my thought was that this would go into like music beefs in general.
Sure. The Smiths versus the Cure. That's a big one.
Or just like, and then they actually hated each other, though. That's reminiscent of when Eazy-E left NWA, and he just put out a lot of, like, there's just like a lot of like tracks.
Sure.
Like directly attacking each other.
That's a big thing on rap. Rap is just
it is a thing. Yeah, and maybe that's for a different episode. Because it is. I do find.
Well, you could also say that in the Britpop scene too. Also,
Oasis versus Blur.
Sure. That was a big thing.
Neil Young. I always thought that. Did you guys know that "Sweet Home Alabama" was basically in response to Neil Young's "Southern Man"?
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's even a line in "Sweet Home Alabama" that's like something about like tell Neil Young that like this Southern man. I got to look up the lyrics, but
the reason I think I do not like Sweet Home Alabama, I think a big reason is because it's so played,
so overplayed.
It's so overplayed, and I just it's not the fault of the band. It's just the song itself.
It's not the fault of the band. But here's my final point as to why if I have to take that side, there are so many. They all sell out, whatever. Like, but there are so many Stones songs that have been used in commercials and all that kind of stuff, and I don't hold that against them, but I've heard them in so many commercials that I just hate the song. I just can't stand the song,
like Satisfaction.
Like Satisfaction. Like, even though like the first, I don't know, 1,000 times I heard it, I liked it. Beatles have also been in commercials and all that kind of stuff. Not a single one of those songs makes me angry. The same way.
Exactly.
Can I say something?
Totally agree with you.
Can I say something about that? Actually, is for the longest time the Beatles didn't allow their songs to be in commercials, but they never owned a lot of the rights to their songs, and so when Michael Jackson took over that, he started putting them in.
Michael Jackson owned the rights to the Beatles
so I think part of it is
a while.
It wasn't as they didn't saturate the commercials as much because I think for a long time. I still think that there's a thing on that, even
Max,
with regards to
Max. As long as we've been alive,
Beatles
songs were used in commercials.
Yeah, but
I will say this though.
Yeah, getting better, I guess.
All right, so let's begin with final thoughts. When we go around, who wants to start it off?
I'll start it off, and again, I should start off by saying I'm annoyed by having to choose it all, but if I have to choose, there's no question. The catalogs speak for themselves. I think anybody who like would claim to be more of a Stones person than a Beatles person is kind of being duped by the whole image thing. Just the marketing of it all, like, yeah, I'm edgy, so I like the Stones, whatever. You can like both bands, but if you have taste and you have to choose, the Beatles are better. They can do what the Stones do, and they can do 1,000 other things. And I do think there is something to, like, if you hear Satisfaction as many times as I've heard it, you don't ever want to hear it again. Right. And I don't feel the same way about "Come Together" or any of those other Beatles songs that
Hey
are just
Jude,
like,
or
maybe because there's more. Maybe you don't listen to those all on repeat. You listen. There's a lot more variety to choose from. Maybe
I've certainly heard.
Maybe I don't know.
I feel like "Come Together" can get played out a lot, but I still don't get tired of it. Anyway, Max, your final point.
Well, I mean, is my final thought supposed to be in argument of the Rolling Stones? I mean,
you can do the same caveat that I did a bit of a caveat. So.
Yeah, why don't you say?
Okay, here's the thing.
Well, make the best argument, but then
here it is. Look, I think people that say they're Rolling Stones fans, I think what they mean by that is there is I think those people have bought into the image that has been projected out there to them of what the Rolling Stones are, and they're down with that. they're down with this raw, edgy style that speaks to them for some reason, and regardless of the actual music out there, the actual catalog, I think maybe they're aware of what they bought into, but that whatever they're buying into, that speaks to something personal about them anyway, because all of it's corporate anyway, right? So if I'm going to choose a style that speaks to me the most, it's that one, I guess. That makes sense.
But your caveat is that you would obviously pick the Beatles.
Look, I am trying to be a devil's advocate here. I'm having sympathy for the devil here, as it were.
Yeah, we got to end on that.
But
I gotta get my thought.
Look, I was even just, they have that saying, the greatest rock and roll band of all time, right? And that's not something people said. That's something that was introduced when they were going on stage during a 1969 tour that they had. That I think one of their managers or somebody that was part of their team made up. It wasn't like something that is. They bestowed that upon themselves, basically. So. That's also something that people buy into is like, oh, they're the greatest rock and roll band of all time. No, that's something that they bestowed upon themselves as being the greatest of all time,
Look, here's what I got to say.
But it's all corporate.
And you both have great points. But look, I'm going to pick the Beatles too, obviously, as the judge. Now, I have a friend who loves both bands, and he's like, objectively, obviously the Beatles are a better band, he says, but he's like, but that raw, edgy sound of the Rolling Stones speaks more to me. But I would argue against what I would argue against that is, okay, what about something like Helter Skelter? I mean, the way Paul sings on that is so raw and edgy.
Yeah, but there is something, I'm going to argue against that, actually.
Limited. It's limited.
There is something there is a sort of affectation that Paul is putting on that doesn't seem quite as
an affectation
like,
to what Mick Jagger is putting on. Yes, there is.
And honestly,
there is, but it seems a little bit more genuine because
I am a Stones fan. As a Stones fan, there is something different about there being one song on an entire album that's edgy, versus like being
There's
able to
a few
sit down.
songs on that album that are edgy.
Well, okay, sure. I mean,
Revolution is kind of edgy, Revolution 1.
Yeah, obviously.
Well, here's the thing: you can argue actually. There's a lot of edgy Beatles tunes too. I mean, look, even just the way
She's So Heavy.
Regardless, even the song itself. Listen to John Lennon on Twist and Shout. There's something really edgy about the way he's singing. He's like screaming his vocals. Actually, he had a bad cold or something.
But it's not just the vocals; it's the dirtiness of the guitar.
It is dirty sounding. As you listen to Anna too, Anna go to him. They're kind of out of tune. They're out of tune, kind of even too. And it's like that's so. I feel like the Beatles made it okay in a way. To be like, we're a little out of tune. That's okay.
Here's the ultimate argument.
We switched sides just now.
3 of the 4 members of the Beatles, and once the fourth member, all wrote songs, and all of them wrote hit songs. Only 2 of the guys in the Rolling Stones wrote songs, and it was usually one of them wrote the melodies and one of them wrote the lyrics.
That's a thing. That's a thing to note.
The power of 4 is greater than the power of.
That is a good
2.
point.
Well, okay, but to your point though, Nickon,
but I'm not going to hold it against them. However you make your hits, that's
sure. That's true.
There is a kind of dirty quality to
the Stones,
to the majority of their stuff, as opposed to. So I guess that's when people think of. I kind of relate to that more. That's what makes it seemingly more genuine in a way.
Here's something for me. This is just for me. It's harder for me to pick between. I mean, it's very easy for me to pick the Beatles over the Stones, but like I don't like having to do it. But if you ask me who's better, the Stones or Zeppelin, I don't even have to hesitate to tell you that Zeppelin is better. I don't know. That's just a thought I had. I don't know if that's relevant.
Interesting.
What about?
Wait, can I ask you this?
I can say that real quick. What about the Kinks versus the Rolling Stones?
I have no hesitation to say the Kinks. I would.
And they have a more varied catalog too.
But they also have a dirty quality to them in the beginning too.
They're more punk rock actually.
They're dirty, but they sound. I hate to say it, but it sounds even still. I don't know. Maybe that's just a preference, but like.
Let's just say there's many bands better than the Stones, and we can't really think of many that are better than the Beatles.
Can I ask you this real quick, Nickon? Would you consider the Beatles your favorite band, or can you?
I wouldn't consider them my favorite. I don't like doing favorites.
Okay, the top five material.
Top five material, I can easily say that. But like, favorite.
Could you pick
so
between
much of it
Zeppelin
depends on
and
my mood, and so much of it depends on on the era. Like at this point, my favorite bands are contemporary, as opposed to my favorite band right now is the Mars Volta, and they're like,
oh wow, okay,
that's like a completely.
They've been around for a while now.
It's a completely different conversation altogether.
I mean, that's prog rock,
Yeah. So I don't know. It's which is why I don't like. I love the Beatles, and I'm glad I don't have to pick them over the Mars Volta because I don't know what I would do.
Sure. Oh, that's interesting.
By the way, She's So Heavy. That's a dirty song right there.
It is, but it's like
part of it.
It's like a little.
Part of it,
okay, though, so there's some dirtiness over here and there, but the Stones, it's like, at least for the good albums, it's like all the way through.
Sure.
It's in the way it's recorded, and
again, speaking of like image, that is a choice they made in their recording engineering style. They purposely made it wasn't like something necessarily inherent. They were like, no, we want it to be like this kind of quality sound, I guess.
Because this is the thing that we're trying to create.
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that is an inherent preference of theirs. You could also say the Rolling Stones were always doing things after the Beatles. They were kind of copying them sometimes, like with the album covers, for example. That album cover that kind of looks very similar to the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
The flowery one.
What's that called? What's that one called? Again?
I don't know. I'm so bad with the names, so let me look it up. But as we're doing that, maybe we should.
We should. Sorry, this has gone on way too long.
Well, if you look at His
Satanic Majesties.
I mean, that's very clearly inspired by.
That's what it is. Their Satanic Majesty's Request. That's
the one with the flowers.
That's the one with that. Yeah, exactly that.
Well, that image
like
is it has this quality that they're looking for. They're sitting on this. It's inspired clearly by.
See, by the late '80s, they're just they're doing an entire album, and maybe one song is memorable off the entire album of 13
It's interesting
songs.
You say that because Billy Joel. Billy Joel actually stopped recording new material in 1993. He said, "I am no longer capable of writing the pop hits that I was once able to do." And he said, I wish more artists my age would recognize that, because it would just make people a lot happier at their concerts. It's I don't have to hear a new song of yours.
I don't have to endure this. Yeah.
And that's true. Anyway, I think we've gone on long enough with this topic. I could talk about the Beatles forever, but we're not here to do that today. We're here to say, hey, you can like both bands.
Thank you.
You don't have to pick either.
You don't have to pick either. But if you had to pick, the Beatles are probably better. Okay,
probably.
But hey, the choice is yours and yours alone. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Splitting Hairs with Max, Nicky, and Nickon.